Welcome, everybody. Appreciate you turning in. This is Vote for Vermont. My name is Eric Lamontaigne. I'm the executive director at Campaign for Vermont. I'm standing in for Pat McDonald, your normal host today. I know a lot of you will be heartbroken not to be able to see her today, but I promise she's done probably, 30 other recordings, maybe 40 other recordings of this. So there's plenty of opportunities to see her if you'd really like to. Again, this is another episode in our Meet the Candidate series. So we've invited all candidates of all parties to come and join us and give us a quick 30-minute talk about who they are, what they're standing for, what they hope to achieve if they're elected to office or when they're reelected to office. If there's somebody that you haven't seen on here that you think should be on this show, please let us know. We'd love to have them on. So let's get right to it. My guest today is Charen Fegard. She is a state representative for Berkshire, Franklin, Highgate, and Richford. Did I get that right?
Yes, the Franklin 5 district. Thank you for having me.
Why don't you just take a few minutes and kind of introduce yourself to our audience?
Okay. I live in Berkshire, and we have a homestead farm there. It is not big, though it is bigger this year than it has been in previous years because of our desire for food sovereignty and food security, even if there are supply chain disruptions. I am on the house.
I was just sorry to interrupt. I was going to point out, I see all of your corn there in the background.
Yes, our Abenaki dent corn, which did beautifully this year and grinds up really nicely. So I'm on the House Agriculture and Forestry Committee, which is a really good fit for me. I have a passion for the land and for those who make a living working and stewarding the land. I'm a restorative justice panel volunteer in Richford. I'm on the Northway Solid Waste District Board, and I have cats. And someday, when my life is just so, I'm going to have a dog again.
Nice. I did an interview last week where there was two cats just kind of roaming around in the background.
Yeah. Goober's sleeping on the couch right back over there. Yeah.
Well, let's jump in a little bit to your priorities. What are some of the key priority areas that you're discussing with your voters and that you hope to really pursue when the next session rolls around?
Okay, so the mitigating COVID-19 impacts is one, and as sort of a status update, Vermont is doing remarkably well compared to a lot of other states, and I don't just mean our COVID numbers. For instance, we received, the CARES Act money we received was about $2,000 per capita, compared to some states that only got about $300 per capita. But also our reserves, our rainy day reserves are still fully intact, and these are part of what's going to get us probably through some of the rougher spots. Some of how we weather the storm will depend on the actions at the federal level of our lawmakers there. Something that is or has been historically a big topic in recent history in my district is the Act 46 forced mergers. Three of my towns were quite impacted by it negatively and were forced. So knowing that, for instance, Halifax and Reedsboro were just allowed to separate, to split, is something that makes me think that Franklin and Highgate and Richford may have those opportunities. I'm hoping, we'll see. Probably one of my biggest goals, and it's more of an umbrella, is that I want those who are legislating and are for more urban environments to understand the difference between where they are and the rural communities in Vermont. There are two Vermonts. There's Burlington and Montpelier and the I-89 corridor, and the further you get away from that corridor, the more different things are. And sometimes policy that's really good for an urban environment isn't so great for a rural environment. Act 46 is one of those. So perhaps advocating for more nuance in the State House is really my big thing. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, that's a recurring theme from some of the folks that I've talked with in the more rural districts about the idea that, you know, the hey, we're here too, waving the flag.
Right.
Looking at, so how long have you been a member of the legislature now?
I'm still a freshman, so
Okay.
coming to the end of my first term.
Gotcha.
And so the learning curve is steep. You know, I understand people who are longtime veterans continue to learn, but it's been interesting, kind of the stifling of the learning curve with being outside of the State House.
Yeah,
You know,
this was a heck of a year to be jumping into it.
Yeah.
So is there any things that you feel particularly proud of that you've accomplished, or that you feel like you've really been glad to have been a part of and worked on?
Well, you know, I've been really glad to be part of a lot of different things. I've also been frustrated and cross-eyed with it at other times, because the way the system works is that the majority leadership decides what bills come off the wall in every committee. I don't feel like I can claim accomplishment because I know that there were things that were allowed to happen. You know, once the ball gets rolling, that's up to us. But I have introduced 2 bills. One was subsumed by another one. I wanted to eliminate the sunset on on-farm slaughter allowances because our, you know, people have been slaughtering on farm for about 10,000 years. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't quite get the sunset removed, but I got it pushed out 4 years. And if you worked with others, obviously, nothing that I did except for the next thing was done in a vacuum. I also introduced a bill that would make it easier and very clear for women who are facing a mastectomy or have had a mastectomy and need follow-up surgery to clean it up afterwards, specifically women who either opted not to reconstruct or the reconstruction went badly and they had to explant their implants. And I managed to do that not by passing the bill, but the bill caught some attention and allowed me to work through other channels so that the Department of Financial, oh my gosh, I'm having a brain glitch.
Was it DFR?
DFR, thank you. DFR, I almost said responsibility and then the word wouldn't get out of my head. Department of Financial Regulation helped make sure our insurers know that that is something that needs to be done and covered by insurance, that it is not cosmetic, it is reconstructive. And
wow. Excellent.
And my initial bill and this model have both been taken to other states.
Wow, well congratulations to get that and to be able to get that done in your first year is fantastic.
Well, first term,
first term, excuse me.
Yeah.
Wow, well that's awesome. I feel like there should be more press around that or something. I hadn't heard that, but that's great.
Well, so until the 90s, women often could not get reconstruction covered by insurance. And then a law was passed guaranteeing that. And the pendulum went far in the other direction. So women are expected to reconstruct, but the majority of women about half the women age 50 and older don't reconstruct. And sometimes sometimes they end up with results that are unacceptable instead of a comfortable, clean, flat closure on their chest wall. And the insurance companies are never volunteering to pay for anything, so they have sometimes decided that they don't need to pay for that. Vermont's been pretty good. for the insurance companies located in Vermont. But the captive insurance, where it might be an out-of-state insurance company providing coverage for a company, are not necessarily great.
Excellent. Well, good work. Let's maybe not quite as positive of a topic, but with COVID-19 and everything that's going on, we know that 2022 is really where we're going to see the outcomes of this. That 2021 is tough, but the cart won't catch up to the horses really until 2022.
Yes.
Let's see, how do I want to word this? So it's going to be a difficult year. So from a tax perspective, have you thought about this issue and what, as a legislator, you might be prepared to do given this situation?
That's a great question. It's also a really difficult question. A lot of that depends on what our federal lawmakers decide to do. The sooner we get a vaccine, the less devastating it is going to be. We are right now getting ready to pass a budget that is remarkable for its steadiness with last year's and the year before that. So while one thing I can say is I think that there are some services we cannot cut. You cannot cut services that impact children, that impact health, that impact mental health. We're going to have to work as a team. And for the most part, regardless of party line, regardless of branch of government, I've been really impressed, and I think we're going to get through this. But I also think that the model of what normal looks like is going to change. And I really hope that people are being smart with how they spend their money, that they're investing in the local economy, that they're investing in either durable goods that are actually useful or stocking up so that, I've said this term before, supply chain disruptions. We need to be prepared. We are in the first wave. And, I'm frankly more concerned about supply chain disruptions that are going to be, where are all the truck parts made for our commercial trucks? Mexico. Great. So, maple syrup producers a lot of them couldn't get their jugs and lids for this spring. A lot of them just received them this last month. So I feel like there's so much on there. So what am I going to do to help fix this? Well, I'm going to do the best I can, but I also need to see exactly what the landscape looks like and what the options are. I could make promises, but they wouldn't be honest.
Right. If you had the magic lamp to predict the future, I'm sure, but
I'd rather have a magic wand.
That's good. That's a good response.
Yeah.
Another area I'd love to hear your thoughts on are dealing with how to address some of Vermont's ongoing unpaid and unfunded liabilities. So we have $4.5 billion for pensions and health insurance for state employees and teachers. We have the unfunded liability that is what we are going to have to pay to clean up Lake Champlain. Mm-hmm. We have unfunded liabilities in our education system and in our healthcare. So there's a lot of money that the state owes that we don't know how we're going to pay.
Yeah, that's true. All but one of the things you mentioned is closely tied to the cost of health insurance and healthcare. The reason why it costs so much to hire and maintain an employee of the state, whether they're an educator or work at an agency in administration or are boots on the ground helping farmers or protecting water quality, is because of the exorbitant, unconscionable expense of health insurance and healthcare costs. And this is national, and this is what's gutting us. at the core of it. And this is a failure of national policy for decades now, starting with the 1973 HMO Act, and continuing with the, when was it? When we prohibited Medicare from negotiating for lower drug prices. You know, it's just been one thing after another. And, you know, I can't fix that. Again, I'm a cog. I'm a cog in a larger machine. And as we are able to identify places to make progress, we can do that. But a lot of it's Band-Aids, because the gaping wound is a failure of federal policy, both tax policy and policy around health insurance and healthcare. Before 1973, healthcare was not a for-profit model. It was considered an essential service. How are we going to compete with shareholders and CEO pay as opposed to just trying for somebody to get their heart medication or get in to see their doctor? It doesn't make sense to pit these things against each other. The clear loser is the patient.
So you're it sounds like what you're suggesting is really a whole systemic look at the paradigm that put us into this position.
Right, and unfortunately, I'm not queen. I wish I was, because I could fix it quickly, and there'd be a lot of unhappy people, but they would probably be getting publicly something or another. Because the extraordinary wealth that has been gleaned, because you know how much are you giving to your congressional delegation candidate of choice? Well, I guarantee you, nationwide, you're not giving nearly as much as the pharmaceutical company, the health insurance company, lobbying groups. And, Citizens United really did a lot to kill our democracy and to take us to the next level of oligarchy.
They recently moved forward, and I think they actually overrode a veto on the new Vermont Global Warming Solutions Act. What are your thoughts on this policy?
Well, I saw that, the question about how do I feel about Phil Scott vetoing it? I understand why he did it. I mean, would anybody call him a Republican anymore if he hadn't? I understand why he did it. I believe the reasons are political, and I'm a fan of Phil Scott's in a lot of ways. But one of the big issues that people need to be aware of, speaking of state debts, though we don't technically call them debts, we call them, unfunded pension issues, is that Moody's and other credit rating companies are beginning to take into account whether or not states have climate change, resilience, and mitigation plans and what they're doing with them. Insurance companies are also beginning to pick this up. So at least this way, we're going to spend some money and we're going to get something out of it instead of just paying higher interest rates because we've gone down on our credit rating. This is obviously, and I could argue about climate change being real and scientific consensus and all of that, and explain that the military has been calling on us to recognize it for 10 years. But either that or you're diametrically opposed to that information. I think everybody cares about money. And I think we'd rather pay to get some things done here than to just pay increased interest rates.
Yeah, I mean, that's if something's important, you need to find a way to fund it. Speaking of funding, the governor has said that the economy is not really coming back as quickly as we'd hoped from all of this. Now, again, that goes back to the magic 8-ball question of this, but are there any steps that you would like, if you did have that magic wand, any steps that you would like to see taken that aren't being taken to help us in our economic recovery?
I think we need to help people understand and help businesses, especially agricultural and forest products businesses and other things that are local where we're actually producing here. We need to support our local producers, especially those items or services that are essential. In order to have security, we need to have as much sovereignty as possible. So why would I buy a tomato that comes 3,000 miles to get to my plate when there's a farmer down the road that has had tomatoes, and in some parts of the state, they still have tomatoes. Darn them, ours are all gone now. If you want your money to stimulate the economy, spend your money here. Spend it on things that are helpful in some way. I guess part of what's hard about these questions is the assumption that all the answers lie within the state, that the state is going to come up with the solutions. And the state can help, but really people have to also step up and take responsibility for the decisions they make in their daily lives. And I'm not lecturing, because I know a lot of people get home exhausted and don't have a whole lot of energy, but instead of going to Costco, go to your local store. Instead of buying something made in China, if you have another option, buy the version made in the US. Better yet, if you can, buy the one made in Vermont. Not that we make a whole lot here anymore. But, this is where, vote for me, I'm going to solve everything. Well, it needs to be more of a team effort. And the team isn't just the people going to the State House or Zooming to the State House. The team has to be all of us. And that includes people across all party lines.
Excellent. Another area, so in one area the Campaign for Vermont has actually been very involved in over the years is ethics, government ethics, state ethics. Mm-hmm. We have the Ethics Commission now, which fortunately, the legislation, Campaign for Vermont initially wrote that legislation that got through, and it didn't get passed quite the way we were hoping it would, with the amount of teeth that we were hoping that it would have. But the Ethics Commission has since proposed some ethics guidelines with the idea that hopefully they would end up being adopted by statute. But there's been some controversy over that, over this. Just wondering your thoughts on ethics within the State House.
I'm really glad you clarified and gave me a little more information, because I wasn't quite sure what had inspired that question. My thought is that humans are messy and clever, and one of the brilliant things about our lousy pay is that it keeps those who are drawn to great power and wealth from running for office. It also means you don't get too many young people. You have a lot of retirees, people who, we have lost a number of young legislators. They're not running again. They can't do it on no benefits, and the pay being what it is. I did not vote to change the way we are paid, because I don't feel now is the time to address that. But we do need to have clear guidelines. I also think it is good to have clearly stated or laid out consequences. If legislators are anything like children, and in some ways we are, that's how you parent. That's also how you hold citizens accountable. And, I have not observed any abuses of power when we were in the State House, but I'm also just a freshman House rep trying to, get something good to happen for our farmers and land and forest products industry. So
I think the big misconception is that, and one that we're trying really hard to change the perception on, is that by establishing a code of conduct, an ethical code of conduct in statute for state employees, for legislators, is that that's not an accusation of impropriety. That's not saying, hey, we think there's a lot of problems. That's more of, let's create a system of accountability so that the public and reinstill some of that trust between the government and the public.
So when you said state employees and lawmakers, I was thinking in terms only of lawmakers, but I think that certain state employees are provided with clear guidelines. For instance, Department of Corrections, I told you I'm on the restorative justice panel for Richford, though we haven't done anything for some months now. We had to take trainings. We had to sign a piece of paper after reading it stating what the don'ts are when interacting with somebody who's coming in as a client in the program. And when anybody is in a position of power.
I'm going to interrupt for 1 second. I think I need to clarify what I meant by that. I think I was a little misleading in my statement. When I say state employees, it's more referring to like state agencies and appointed positions. So anybody in your case, if they are under the jurisdiction of, say, human resources, and human resources are the people that need to enforce this, it wouldn't be meant to necessarily supersede something like that.
Okay.
So
all right. So
appointed officials, elected.
So political appointees, political appointees and elected officials. I don't have any problem with. I certainly have no problem with clearly outlined codes of conduct. That makes sense. As a woman, I've been aware for a good portion of my life, especially when I was younger and stereotypically cuter, of sexual harassment being an issue. Haven't had to deal with that for some years, fortunately, but that was an issue in the State House for a long time, and we need to have clear guidance about that, as well as other things. Conflict of interest. I was impressed to see a few people opt to recuse themselves from voting a couple times this legislative term because they felt they had a conflict of interest because they owned rental units. But yeah, I think it's good to have clear lines, and also to have enough room where the rule doesn't become so rigid and large that it is applied where it doesn't make sense to apply it.
So we have about 4 or 5 minutes here. So I want to make sure I give you a minute at the end to give us your little stump speech, your elevator speech. But I want to talk quickly. I mean, we're seeing a lot of unrest right now when it comes to racial equity in the state, and these protests that have been happening in Burlington and across the country. What needs to happen to bring people back together?
Okay, so you blipped out a little bit. I heard you say country and then blip back together, but I think I know what you asked. Like, how do we bring people back together?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that we need to do is Margaret Atwood. One of my favorite quotes I've come upon lately is, make sure, it's a Margaret Atwood quote. When you speak truth to power, make sure it's the truth. We are understandably upset by all these videos coming out of police essentially murdering Black people. And without everybody having a cell phone with a camera on it, I wouldn't know about this stuff. I'd read an occasional story. a lot of things get covered up. And the process first involves saying, wow, there's a problem. And the problem is more severe or less severe in different places. And just like you said with the ethics, put something in place ahead of time so that it is clear. You know, I've lived in other places beside Vermont. I have seen the ugliness of overt racism. And I also, you know, can look at statistics and see the ugliness of overt and less obvious forms of racism that impact all of us and, you know, deny us the accomplishments of people who were never given a reasonable chance to contribute something remarkable. So let's say we have a problem. We've got a problem. What are we going to do about it? The one thing is accountability, high standards for our law enforcement, which is tough because they're not paid as well here. And we lose a lot of them to New York, Massachusetts, where they have big unions and much bigger pay and benefits. But we have to have high standards and accountability. And we also have to make sure we're supporting them so that they have the training and the resources, because it's a job that I would never want, and most of us wouldn't want, and fewer of us could do well.
Well, we've got about 60 seconds left here. Sorry to cut you short here, but we've got about 60 seconds left. Do you want to give us just a quick elevator pitch?
I think what I really want to say is that we are at an incredibly divided time right now, and that one of the most important things we can do is get to know people, whether it is your neighbor that you don't always see eye to eye with. There are things you certainly agree with them on, and we need to make sure our communities are in good standing and that we are taking care of each other. And also, don't just rely on the letter by a candidate's name. Get to know who they are. Get to know, you know, whether someone has a D, an R, or a P by their name, or an I doesn't mean that they're not a, you know, a jerk or a really conscientious, hardworking, smart person. And I just strongly encourage everybody to do that so you're making well-informed decisions. Citizenship doesn't just begin and end with when you're holding the ballot in your hand.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Charen. I appreciate your time today. And thank you to everybody who tuned in to listen to this and to watch this. And thank you, and keep listening beyond the sound bites.